Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. Those of you who've made it on so far. My name is Paul Wagner. I'm the coordinator here at the UAVs for Payload Delivery Working Group. We're super excited today to be sharing with you about the Lake Victoria Challenge. We've got several guests who are going to be speaking on the panel. We have Denise Soasilo, who's the Industry Relations Lead for the Lake Victoria Challenge. Also David Guerin, the Safety Advisor. And then we're hoping that Freddie Mbuya will be making it as well. He's a partner with Lake Victoria Challenge and runs the African Drones chapter in Tanzania. And then also Dr. Olivier Defau will be joining us from Village Reach, who attended the most recent trials for Lake Victoria Challenge too. So just a quick little, I guess, just run through of how we're going to structure this. We're going to have a couple different topics that are going to be addressed by the panelists about the Lake Victoria Challenge. If you have questions while they're talking, feel free to type your questions into the chat box. You should see it there in your Zoom window. Please start your questions with your name and who you work for, just so we can know who you are. And then after they finish presenting, we will have at least 15 to 20 minutes for questions at the end. So you can also ask your questions at that time as well. But yeah, so let's get started. I'd like to have Denise start it off first with kind of just a little overview about what the Lake Victoria Challenge is and kind of what the trials were that happened in October.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks Paul for having us. Then thank you for the introduction. For those that maybe haven't heard of the project before, the Lake Victoria Challenge is essentially a project and platform that's been set up or spearheaded by the World Bank, but is now a collaborative effort with a number of organizations. And the objective is really to build a new mobility and delivery paradigm for African markets using cargo drone technology. Trying to move to the next slide here. Okay, there we go. This work is really rooted in improving some of the mobility challenges that Africa is currently facing, especially compared to the rest of the world. There's something called the Rural Access Index, which measures or is a measurement of the percentage of population that has access to an all-weather road within 2 kilometers. And it's also an indicator of people's access to important services and to market. And when we look at Africa in particular, compared to many places elsewhere on the globe, 90% of the rural population in East Asia and Pacific has 2-kilometer access to the road network. In sub-Saharan Africa, the average is 34%. So it's still very, very low. And if you zoom in on the right, what you see is a snapshot of East Africa, also surrounding so Lake Victoria and some East African nations. And we see that in some districts, the index drops to as low as 10% and less. So that being said, to fill this infrastructure gap, the World Bank has estimated that it needs to spend about 75 billion, or there's an infrastructure gap of about 75 billion US dollars annually. At the same time, the 3 major causes of death in Africa are malaria, number 1, HIV/AIDS, and then this is followed by road safety issues and accidents. And in the words of Yang Tae Kim, Africa has 2% of the world's cars, but 20% of road deaths. So there are some challenges here that we hope to address. When we look at cargo drones, one useful comparison is can be to motorcycles, except that drones have the potential to carry similar payloads, but faster, more direct, less damaging, and also night proof. And this is a potential that we're looking to really harness through this platform and the work that we're doing. This is a medical stores department map surrounding Mwanza City, which is here at the center with the green dot, connected with the red lines. What we see in blue are all the health facilities in this region. And the green dots are the major depot locations. And then also you see in red the health facilities that are considered to be difficult or hard to reach. And what you might notice is that a lot of these hard to reach facilities are not actually that far as the crow flies from the major depot location, 75 kilometers and very often much less. And there is already UAV technology in existence that can fly these distances. So the Lake Victoria Challenge is focusing on a number of program components. The first is a major event that we're planning to put on. It's right now scheduled for June 2019, but this might move back to September. And what we're looking at is a 3-day symposium, expo, and a flying competition where we really want to bring the best state-of-the-art in UAV technology and challenge companies to perform in one of or several of 3 challenges. Those being one data challenge, find and assess, and the other 2 emergency deliveries and sort of parcel pickup. The other program components focus on regulations, transport infrastructure, and Tanzania sort of drone business incubation program. So these are all components that are running in parallel. I have to ask, are you able to hear me, or is my connection breaking off?
You sound great from here.
Excellent. I'll continue on. As I mentioned, this is very much a collaborative effort. We have a lot of support, and this was really spearheaded by Tanzanian authorities, especially the Mwanza Regional Commissioner. We have the TCAA on board, the Airports Authority, and several incubation programs, and of course the regional government. In addition to international organizations, UNICEF, World Economic Forum, WFP, JSI, and World Bank Group. Most of the funding so far has come from the Danish government, the Koreans, and the Digital Development Partnership from the World Bank. And we're really looking to potentially grow this initiative and engage with additional actors. All our work is being advised on by a global advisory board, where we bring in expertise from aviation, management, operations, and some of the visionary work that Jonathan is doing on drone ports. Now to the trial. Because we're planning to put on a fairly challenging event in challenging operational environments, we had decided to put on a safety trial on our operations. And this happened at the end of October, where we had, initially this was planned to be for us to test the operations, the flights, the safety procedures, and also to have discussions in a more of a close group. So it was an invitation-only event. It ended up to be a little bit bigger than we had planned. We had 280 participants from 23 different countries. We had 5 different drone companies there. We did close to 40 flights, several UTM providers, and regulatory bodies from 9 different countries. So we had a sort of a mini symposium and some trial flights we had put on. This is the routes that we had tested. primarily, our home base was at the Malaika Beach Resort. And there's a medical facility on Juma Island that's hard to reach. It's only 17 kilometers away. So there was an outbound track over to the far side of Juma Island and then coming back, altogether about 40 kilometers. What David is, I'm sure, going to address is that just north of Malaika Beach Resort, very close, is the international airport. I believe about 1,000 meters or less away from where we were launching the drones, and that gave us some additional challenges and probably a lot of work for David to make sure that we can do this safely. And I mean, the reason we did this is because we think that if we are to use drones, then they need to be operating in environments where there are most likely people, and there might be airports. So, so we're trying to challenge ourselves to see that this is doable and can be done. These are the 5 companies that we had worked with. 4 of them are made or able to carry payloads for delivery, and 1 company, Wingtra from Switzerland, is one that's purely for mapping. And those more targeted at the find and assess challenge that we're putting on. This is the launching site, the Malaika Beach Resort that I had mentioned. We had set up sort of a temporary drone port in the sandy area that you see here in front. We had conference facilities in the back, and then on the left, a bit on the horizon, you already see the runway of the airport, so that was really very, very close. This is a picture of the location near the Juma Island Health Facility. And not too far from there, we set up this little temporary, we also call this a drone port, a location from where we were able to set up, make sure we have all the Wi-Fi connectivity, telemetry links, power management, etc. Drone ports, as I mentioned earlier, kind of feature strongly in what we do because this ground infrastructure will be necessary to operate. Drones need to be repaired, power management is needed, telemetry, weather data, etc. And there's been some thinking that these drone ports would have to be accessible to the community. It should be potentially an open access facility, or partially open, where people can bring goods, deliver goods, manage drone operations from, and potentially link this to also tool shops, digital fabrication facilities, etc. We had a drone port track where several participants had looked into what does it really mean to have a drone port operational in Africa or Tanzania, and they come up with these Mwanza first principles that provide a few guidelines of what they think a drone port should be or provide. I'm not going to read through them, but feel free to look back through this in the future. Yeah, this is a sort of a quick overview. There's a lot more information online that I haven't been able to go through in 10 minutes, but there's, we have a YouTube channel with a lot of material. We have all the presentations from the symposium on our website, and for inquiries, feel free to send a message to info@lakevictoriachallenge.org or contact us through any of the other channels. And with this, I will pass this on to David, who will talk about the regulation side and safety management aspects.
Hi, Denise. Hello, everybody. I've just set up my screen here. Now, just check that you can see that. I'm going to talk about the safety and regulations side of things. My name's David Guerin. My background is in air traffic control, 35 years of that, 20 years as a research expert, and more recently as a change and risk management expert. I focus on drones from 2012. I retired in New Pastures in 2017, and then I conducted the safety work and the airspace integration piece for the Lake Victoria Challenge. So I'll provide an overview of how the risk management progressed. The most important point here really is that this trial was designed as a learning experience, and even if we didn't fly, we still would have learnt an enormous amount. Obviously, safety is foremost. Tanzania, like the 190-odd other countries in the world, are signatories to the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization conventions, and all of its annexes. So work in that area has been increasingly slower for international operations. And so because of that, the rules barely cover what we want to do in Africa and Mwanza. So the important point is that the overarching rule says that it must be operated in a manner to minimize hazards. If I look at Tanzania itself, the Tanzanian Civil Aviation Authority has regulations as well. They're very similar at the high level to the ICAO approach. And the next step, really, where I drew information from, is the Aeronautical Information Circular, first published 2017. It provides excellent guidance for drone operations in Tanzania. However, most of the operations that we planned for were outside what was allowed through this AIC. So this meant that engagement with the TCAA and other Tanzanian authorities was required, and of course a full application for authorization. So I conducted a range of literary reviews. There's very little direction available in preparing such applications, and it's not my expertise, so I reached out as far and wide as I could. I'd previously co-authored this World Bank group piece, a guidance on UAS technology, so managing the risks of unmanned aircraft ops in development projects, and I use this as a template. I then garnered experience from other drone competitions. I was lucky enough to be invited by the UAV Outback Challenge to Australia as a judge. This event in its 11th year. It was a Medical Express Challenge this year, so focusing on beyond visual line of sight, full automation, and dynamic no-fly zones, all very exciting. I was also a judge in Llanbedr, I hope my Welsh is appropriate there, for the IMEC-E UAV Challenge. So I continue to gather information from these research and development competitions. I then looked around more closely in Africa, and the UNICEF-sponsored Malawi Drone Corridor is another option for gathering information. They have a humanitarian aid drone test corridor centered on Kasanga Aerodrome. I even reached into conventional flying. So the UK has some excellent guidance for running a flying display, as does Australia. And I cherry-picked everything that I could of relevance from these conventional or manned air show documentation into what we wanted. Then I came up with the topics that we needed to cover. So this is a list. I don't expect you obviously to read them, but it's a list of what I needed on the left for our application letter and on the right for our operations manual. And it covers many topics, including how we would design drone ports, how we would scrutiny and test our competitors, the flying regimes we wanted to implement, the route coordinates, for example. And also there was a chance that we might have heavy lift flight operations asked to be involved, so I needed to plan for that. And then appendices to all these documents include our rest registers, minutes of all the various workshops, and more general information about safety methodology. So the next part of all this was the coordination with stakeholders, and it's very important to have a strong relationship. The first event was a launch event in Mwanza in December 2017, and this is where we kicked off this safety approach. And many people are involved in this. It's supported by the Regional Commissioner of Mwanza and his office. Also involved, of course, the Tanzanian Civil Aviation Authority, especially air traffic control at Mwanza Tower, the Tanzanian Airport Authority, the Tanzanian People's Defence Force, the intelligence security people. So a broad range of stakeholders. And I really have to recognise the timely efforts that these authorities put in. By the way, there's a photo of me up in the tower on the top left there, and our air traffic controllers in Mwanza were exceptional in their help. I also have to acknowledge the work that Denise, who talked before, Freddie and Simon and our team in Tanzania conducted. The next step of the safety work was at a stakeholder workshop in Dar es Salaam. I love this photo in the center here. This is the part of the group there. And right in front of me is the Aeronautical Information Publication of Tanzania, well dog-eared with all my notations on board. The next step, we conducted a range of hazard identification or hazard ID workshops and risk assessment events, and then procedures meetings with local stakeholders. The outcome of this was that we needed to produce more work. So I wrote a memorandum of understanding for all the major stakeholders. This laid down the minimum requirements to support the flying activities. I then took the outcomes from all of this work and produced an operations manual. From that, the application letter to the authorities for approval to fly in the safety evaluation trials for the Lake Victoria Challenge. By the way, there are over 30 drafts of each of these, and sometimes I was riding in a 41-degree heat in our camper van while on holidays in Spain. Flying participants also had to submit individual applications to the TCAA. At the end of the day, we couldn't proceed without meeting all of the safety mitigations, and also we needed to receive authorization, of course, from the authorities, and we did this. Then on the day, we also needed to receive clearance or approval from air traffic control. So this all highlighted how important the safety evaluation trial was to test all of these pieces, all the players of this undertaking, a very complex undertaking. And everything we expected to go wrong did, I can tell you. We learned so much. Everything we planned for happened. So all the mitigations we implemented held up, and we avoided any really serious incidents or events, and we're all very proud of that, of course. It was a very valuable trial. And now I'm just going to jump into a bit of Safety 101, safety information. Drones are a new entrant, obviously, into conventional air traffic management. We all consider them to be disruptive and valuable. Traditional aviation approach doesn't have answers to a lot of the main safety risks for drone operations, especially when you consider BVLOS, with no pilot on board, no detect and avoid, no sense and avoid. And the platforms are different from what conventional aviation is used to. Operations are different. Legally, though, drones are aircraft, and they just don't fit into the present frameworks. Conventional aircraft don't usually crash, thank goodness. So traditionally, when I consider a ground risk, JARUS is the leading group of experts. They take their regulatory expertise and they swap it into recommendations, a single set of technical safety operation requirements for safe operations of drones. And they especially focus on small unmanned aircraft at low altitudes. So I took a lot of work from them. However, I used the conventional risk approach for the Lake Victoria Challenge safety evaluation trials. Future versions, we will have a SORA approach, a specific operational risk assessment under JARUS, but at this stage we stayed very conventional. So it's also not just safety risk management. I have to point out there's also environmental risk management. There's privacy, data protection, security risk management, and insurance and liability considerations. So risk management is a very broad area. The safety risk approach was divided into ground risks. So we're talking about participants involved, third-party spectators, the general public, avoiding urban or populous areas. And also we had to consider damage to any property or sensitive infrastructure. And the airborne risk is the avoidance of other drones, of obstacles, of terrain, hazardous weather, other airspace users. These were considered separately, but they were really intertwined, and especially during unexpected events. So a flyaway or loss of control of a drone, or an accidental violation by a conventional aircraft into our drone flying area. This lovely spreadsheet, we were right next to the airport, as Denise said, 3,000 feet from the center line of runway 1230. And the airspace is Class D. It's controlled out to 30 miles radius. There's no air traffic control surveillance, and it's all procedural control. So all aircraft within the airspace are known, or at least there should be no unknown traffic, and they're provided with a full air traffic control separation service and a flight information service. This chart here, it looks a bit complex, but what I did was I gathered all the movements at Mwanza Airport. I looked at traffic patterns for inbound arrivals on the left here in blue, although there's a bit in buff. On the right are the departures in blue, and in the center are possible gaps in the traffic. There's no priority for drone traffic, so we can't delay any conventional aircraft, and none were, by the way. So even though full integration into this air traffic system is the holy grail, we relied on accommodation and segregation. So we weren't fully integrated, but this was the best approach. It was more realistic. These natural gaps occurred in the traffic, and you can see these red boxes in the center of the screen, and these were our slots. We could trial flights then. We could also have outbound flights, but it was more complex for inbound flights because arrivals might be late or departures might depart early, but I'll talk about that at another forum. So I then needed to look closely at the mitigation of the risk of flying close to spectators. This is a slice of the Malacca Beach Resort where our main drone port was, and you can see the bright green pin at the top center is where the flying occurred. Originally, we were going to have a 100-foot high barrier fence or a net to stop any drones operating out of control from going towards the airport or from people, but we were unable to achieve that, and so we came up with further or replacement mitigations. We had containment areas where anyone who went to the area, so attendees to the conference, were briefed on the risk and how they should act if something went wrong. Then we had technical containment. So a flight limitation using electronic containment areas, geofencing or limitations as it was known, and this was trial. So visual line of sights, for example, could operate in their green area with a containment area, the orangey yellow, but they wouldn't operate in these red no-go areas. So now we can look at the final routes that we decided upon. To the right-hand side of the screen, the orange pin is the Malacca Beach Resort. To the left, the far left yellow pin is Juma Island Beach. There's 2,000 residents and a medical dispensary on Juma Island. So the blue route to the north is the westbound route, and the cream route to the south is the eastbound route. They're both 20 kilometers long. You can see the proximity to the aerodrome. The white line to the far right is the center line. And this airport handles traffic, including large Boeing wide-body 787 Dreamliners. So transport across the lake is what's very important here. And by flying across the lake, we contained it over water, and therefore we reduced our ground risk. However, it doesn't totally remove the risk. There's a large number of vessels, especially fishing vessels on Lake Victoria. Maybe in the future we'll have automated avoidance of these, so another technical challenge to be considered. The drone ports were both on the beach, so we didn't have to overfly people infrastructure to get to them. This is a similar map, but just to expand it a little. To the far left, you can see a green area. This is the search and rescue area, so we can trial our find and assess competitions. It's over 7 square kilometers. We also, if you have a look to the east, it comes up as yellow on this map, but there are yellow and white routes there, and these are diversion routes. If a control link was lost and the drone was out of full control, or so fully automated, with no input from the pilot, we had expectations that the drones would follow these emergency routes to termination zones. However, it was beyond the present capabilities of most or all of the drones involved, so this will be another key feature of future technology. Here's a photo of the drone port on Juma Island. The teams are beating their testing procedures. The fence, the orange fence in the background, is made from local timbers and used fishing net. I mean, I love this. It looks so Tanzanian. It was perfect. So here's the drone port staffing on Malacca Beach Resort, the different high-vis vests representing different roles. These are all clearly laid out. In charge of each drone port was a flying safety officer who managed the flying there, and with the help of airspace spotters. This isn't a great photo in my mind. In the background, obviously, there's clouds. We couldn't control the weather, and we had a severe thunderstorm with water spouts and cumulonimbus lightning come through on one of the days, so that delayed our flying. But what we could control, that light post is obviously in the wrong place, so we had that removed. It was a very unwelcome obstacle. The mat in front of you on the ground was where we started flying from, but the downwash from the mats caused them to lift up and could almost take down a drone. So we learnt a lot. And this is me operating as operations manager, trying to contain all the risks. And also, if something did go wrong, I had a loud hailer and I could do a broadcast, hopefully calmly, to everyone present, and they would start looking up and working out how to avoid any threats. Finally, I required all drones to be equipped with surveillance measures. So this is external to their ground control station and their autopilot displays. This is the Wingtra tailsetter VTOL. It's halfway between Malacca Beach and Juma Island, and it's been tracked independently through a system we got from Involi from Switzerland. So we also had to track all conventional aircraft. There were none flying in the airspace at the time that we did this flight. To be honest, unmanned traffic management, this is a part of that, is an essential piece of this puzzle, and it's a key prerequisite to the future. The last couple of slides here, this is a pretty complex looking piece, obviously, but what I really wanted to point out here was the complexity of the operation. This is the interface with my risk register. It's called a bow tie chart. It gives a diagrammatical overview of the risk management, so you can easily visualize it. The center circle in sort of orangey red is the top event, so a drone operation under control. The blue boxes to the left are all the threats that we decided to use, and also the little pegged white bits on the lines in from there, they're the threat barriers or the controls. So the likelihood and the consequence of each threat could be considered. If you look to the right, they're the consequences, what the end results could be, and then also more harm barriers pegged on each line. This is a very robust approach. It's very difficult to do, but we were very successful, and the end results are obvious that we had no serious incidents occur. This is a summary of what's essential for risk management. I'm out of time. I'm not going to talk through all these, but please message me or us about that in future. That's really it from me.
Great. Thank you so much, David. That was very insightful. I'd like to hand this over to Freddie Mbuya now. Freddie, if you're on, if you could just give a short introduction to yourself and then discuss a little bit more on the community engagement side that happened at the Lake Victoria Challenge.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Hi, I'm Freddie Mbuya. I'm from Uhuru Labs, but also African Drone, and I was involved with the Lake Victoria Challenge right from its inception. And I've got to say that the community engagement part of it was critically important and something which started right from day one. I mean, one of the things we had to do was actually go out to Juma Island and map the whole island in preparation for the trial. Some of the, also mapping Malacca resorts. So the images or the maps which David was showing you were actually mapped by drone. And in all our work in Tanzania so far, the first step in any kind of drone operation is sitting down with the community and explaining to them very clearly what's going on and why it's going on. It's only fair for the first part because we are in their home. And also it's to both manage expectations and to remove the element of any kind of fear or the fear, for example, that we're coming in to photograph their land and perhaps land is going to be taken away from them, but also to manage expectation that we're not coming in and it's going to be an immediate result. So it did involve a number of visits to Juma Island before the event, where we sat down with the community leaders. And I think this is one of the pictures you can see here, where we're actually showing, actually this is from the event, but but similar things to this, where you'd actually go to a school, show a drone, explain how it works, and if at all possible, put a drone in the community's hands, so they understand that it's something which is not, it's not totally foreign from them. And here what you're seeing is Leka from Tanzania Flying Labs, again, impressing upon the youth where drones have come from. That's why he's holding a mobile phone, explaining the technology which goes into a drone and how it can be applicable for them and how it can help them. The other side of the community, which I'd like to talk about, is the actual African drone community, which I'm a founding member of. And that's the African drone operators network, Pan-African network. So other drone operators across Africa. Because one of the main objectives of this was to, or especially in year one coming, is to pair up drone operators in Africa with manufacturers and other operators outside of Africa, because we think it can be a mutual win-win situation. In that we have a need for the technology, and we are also developing our own technology, as you can see in this photograph. But African Drone tries to make it such that it's not only, we're not only the receivers of the technology. So the drone which you see here me holding was actually built during the competition, and actually served a very good purpose. The white box which you see on top of it is an ADS-B transponder, and it was used to test some of the UTM. So the point it's trying to make there is that it is very much a collaborative approach between the African players and the people coming in, where we think that it's not, that we're not only the beneficiaries, but the people coming in are also the beneficiaries, if that's clear. And that's it, really.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Freddie. Olivier, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. If you could give a little introduction about yourself, and then discuss a little bit more about maybe give a perspective of being a participant, and then how these activities at the Lake Victoria Challenge fit in with the current supply chain needs that are in a local context in Africa.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Hi, my name is Olivier Defau. I'm a program lead, the Drone for Health program lead at Village Reach, overseeing the implementation activity, drone activity that Village Reach is doing in Malawi, Mozambique, and DR Congo. I was very lucky to attend and participate the LVC, the Lake Victoria Challenge, in October. And so I participated and wear two hats. The first hat I was wearing was the implementers. So Village Reach is a implementing partner during some testing of drone in country, like I mentioned. But also I was wearing my hat of a system implementation expert. And was able to present a framework that Village has been using to guide the development of these different of the UAS. And the LVC really, I see this event like that help accelerate the development of the drone technology for payload delivery in the public health sector, but also beyond. Because it's really about the need to take a comprehensive approach and look at a drone as a whole system. You know, it's a UAS for unmanned aerial system, and really looking at the different and consider all the different subsystem elements that needs to be in place to assure a safe, reliable, and sustainable use of drone in public health and beyond. And this LVC event, during that event, you know, some of those subsystems were discussed at length. Regulations was discussed at length. Infrastructure and the drone port, what it takes from an infrastructure point of view to have an operational drone port was not only discussed but also tested, as mentioned extensively by David, as well as the community engagement. And I also had, as mentioned, Freddie. And during the event, I was also able to present, so like I said, this framework. So you see, I think you see the screen there, where it is a framework that Village Reach has been using to kind of sensitize and sensitize the different stakeholders around the need to really consider all the different subsystem elements that a US is composed. And so you have on the left here, this is not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the subsystem elements that needs to be tackled when considering using drone for carrying a load. Some of the subsystems fall under the transport logistics, some around regulation, and there is other. And I did this exercise that illustrate or early on the use of drone for payload delivery, and I insist this is for payload delivery, is at the early stage, nascent stage. By doing this comparison about where those subsystems were about 70, 80 years ago when trucks were first introduced. And you see the second column here is like in the 1940s when trucks were introduced, where was those old system elements? Were they already on go, or they still need to be tackled in progress or not at all? And if you look at now, trucks are well performing. All the subsystem elements are in place to assure the safe and reliable and sustainable use of truck. Well, now doing the similar exercise with drone, well, you have kind of a situation analysis here. A drone these days, where do they stand in regards to those subsystem element? And so I was able to go through and explain all those different subsystem elements, where they are at right now for the drone, and make kind of the connection. I don't want to spend much time on this during today's meeting, because this is a roundtable discussion. We have about 18 minutes left, so I want to save that time for you guys, for the people, for the members of the UpDoc to ask questions to all of us. So I'm gonna give back to you the microphone, and if people are interested into the subsystem element, I think the video of my presentation at the LVC is on YouTube, and I can share the link with the entire presentation about the subsystem. Over now.
Great, thank you so much, Olivier. Yeah, so we'd like to open this up to questions now. I'll check the chat box here to see if there's any here, but yeah, if anyone has questions, please state your name and who you work with first, just so we know who's asking the question, and then we can begin a discussion. Even if it's just a comment, not necessarily a question, that's fine too. But in the chat box, Ben from Avi says, are there cold chain requirements for goods transported, and who is best positioned to provide the exact requirements for goods like blood samples, vaccines, and the Tanzanian context? Denise, was this addressed at all in Lake Victoria Challenge?
Not this time around, but obviously there are considerations because blood, and I think there's other people that might be better positioned to answer this, but there are standards, so international UN standards that obviously involve triple packaging, etc., that will have to be followed, and we have some people looking into this. We didn't transport any samples this time around, and most likely if we do a competition, it will be dummy samples, but they'll be about the size of, let's say, an adequately packaged delivery item.
I can
yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can add to that. So a reference document for regulation around cargo with the requirement, the international requirement for carrying biohazard materials such as blood and other can be found in the ICAO Annex 18. So that's a resource that could be used to at least start the development of those recommendations. So the Annex 18 from ICAO. Just wanted to mention that.
Okay, great. Yeah, so let's open this up now. So if anyone has any questions or comments, please jump right in.
Hi, Olivier. This is Marga Eichley from FHI 360. Well, thank you all to all the presenters. This has been really interesting. Olivier, I was wondering if the framework that you've developed for UAS implementation from a systems approach is it available? Could you share it?
Yes, yeah, and I believe, Paul, all those slides will be made available after the roundtable discussion. Is that correct,
Yeah.
Paul?
Yes, the slides will be available as well as the video and audio recording.
Okay. Olivier, is there a larger framework document that you've created?
We are currently developing a wider document with the subsystem elements that needs to be considered, and I can definitely share that with you. I will also look for the YouTube video of the presentation that was given at the LBC, and I will share that with the UpDoug group.
Great, thank you very much.
Ben asked the question, I would be more interested to hear requirements from users, for instance, MSD or other healthcare providers, as there might be also be requirements for cooled storage before and after drone transport. It would be interesting if Lake Victoria Challenge could facilitate an exchange with, for instance, MSD or WHO. Are these things being considered, Denise, do you think, for the larger 2019 event?
Yeah, this is work that's happening basically concurrently, and we've been on talks with the WHO informally. We obviously have drawn on a lot of the learnings from MSF's experiences. Aria Lopez, who was presenting, and we have a formal arrangement with both MSD, I'm not sure if it's formalized yet, and also JSI, who've been helping us to really think through these matters. But I understand that sort of really supply chain integration is a point that we can and probably will focus on a bit more, also with the help of Olivier. So this is a work in progress, but we're very much aware of this need. It's just stay tuned.
Okay. Another question from Helen. She says, I was so impressed by all the hard work to deal with the regulation safety aspects of Lake Victoria Challenge, but this raises concerns about scaling out. How far are you from generalizing the process to get permission to fly? David, this might be a question for you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Helen, that's a great question. I'm going to defer from it actually and just speak to Benjamin's the question before. By the way, we're also in talks with the World Food Programme, and so probably the 2019 event will have some heavy lift activity as well, just to display what we can do there and to talk closer with those people who are in the supply chain and users of what we're trying to provide. And that's very valuable, obviously. So to Helen's question, what is required, and this was the last slide that I showed, we really need a whole lot of prerequisites in place before this can be scalable. I mean, if you have one drone flying from one location to another, it's not really a problem, assuming you've done all the application work and the safety work and it's approved, authorized. What happens when you have another drone crossing that one, or a third one, or a return flight? So eventually you have the numbers of operations that you need some sort of traffic management. And this is vastly an unknown across the world. So I'm working very hard on coming up with a free open source unmanned traffic management system for the likes of Tanzania that could be implemented anywhere around the world with the resource poor environments that we're talking about. That doesn't answer your question directly, but actually there's no shortcut, to be honest, to solve the safety discussion. I hope that helps.
Yeah, sounds great. David, I think another question for you too. This one's from Eric Lunder from Linden International. He
I'd like
asks, is
if
the
possible, if I can
Tanzanian
take a little bit slight, sorry to interrupt, something on to address Helen's question as well as to where we are in regulations. I'm not sure whether you also are talking about current regulations in Africa, but that is one of the reasons why there were several CAAs represented in the Lake Victoria Challenge. And building on what David just said, I actually think that perhaps the UTM providers were even more critical or even more important in this initial year zero event, because it's on that backbone which will allow such operations to happen in the future. We also have to understand that the kinds of operations we were doing were purposely pushing the envelope. They were beyond visual line of sight, and they're the kinds of operations which are not allowed in many other countries of the world. So again, in an African context, the regulations are pretty much at a similar level as we're seeing in the rest of the world. And one of the objectives of the Lake Victoria Challenge was to keep on building on that and allow the regulators to see that this kind of thing can be done in a controlled manner. So to some degree, the technology is not there yet. As David said, we need UTMs to be widespread and available, but it's getting there. And I think it's with events like this where that kind of technology can be demonstrated to the regulators that we get their confidence.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks, Freddie. Following up on that, Eric Lunder asks if the Tanzanian CAA is requiring manifesting for each UAS flight, or was there a blanket approval for the event?
So yeah, I might just jump in there as well. I think I explained this application that the Lake Victoria Challenge put in was an overarching application for this event, and it will be modified for future events. The authorization was only for this event, and all of the 5 competitors or participants also submitted applications to the TCAA underneath this application. To my understanding, the other operations that have been outside Lake Victoria Challenge have had approval for a range of flights. For example, Wingcopter with the trials to Ukariwe Island, and I think they did 20 odd flights, and they had one approval, but each time they still had to get clearance from air traffic control with each of their flights. And just to add to what Freddie said, if you ever look at droneregulations.info, the website that Denise and I fund, it contains the regulations as up to date as we can keep it for all the countries around the world. And you can see how non-standard most countries are compared with each other. There's no interoperability between countries and across borders. So the work that Freddie's talking about that we're attempting in the Lake Victoria Challenge will be very valuable.
Okay. How did the Tanzanian regulators react to the event overall?
Well, David, again, I think they're very, very supportive. I mean, it was time critical that the TCAA and the authorities had to put in a lot of work in a short amount of time, and they really stepped up to that. They're conservative, which is necessarily their job as aviation authorities. So they were good. I think they're very supportive, and they're pleased that it's in Tanzania. We'll just keep an eye on what happens with the regulations in Tanzania in the future.
Okay. This is more of a planning question from Eric. He's asking, are the stakeholders all planning to be at the resort at the time of the event? I guess this is for 2019. And is the resort blocking rooms specific to this event? Are they publicly available?
The event very likely won't be at the Malacca Beach Resort for next year, but at a different facility. And there will be blocked rooms at the facilities and at the surrounding hotels. We've done something similar for this event, so this will be organized. And are they publicly available? I believe so. If you've signed up for the event, then you should have access to blocked rooms. At least we'll aim to do it this way.
Sounds good. More detailed question. Sarah De La Rosa from ISG asked, will the event aim to undertake a think tank addressing different comparative business model options with the companies and to determine how to optimize cost of infrastructure needs versus actual operations, and also consider capacity building, hand over to local companies, etc.?
That definitely fits into what we're hoping to do. So with the LVC, really, we want to provide the platform for someone like you, Sarah, to do this kind of work. And what we're looking at is comparing different business models and surfacing the best business models and technologies that can do this work. And I see that this what you suggest here would be very, very compatible with what we're doing. So I don't see why not. We just need potentially someone to maybe take on that module for the next year and to lead this kind of work. So you're welcome to connect with us more. And I know we've been having several conversations to get something like this started. Maybe Olivier, if you want to also jump in here.
Yeah, and so just to add a little bit to respond to Sarah, and as well as I think Helen's comment earlier, or maybe just somebody else about the cold chain. One thing that we've been discussing is to bring to the discussion, how do you operationalize the use of drone and have logisticians come and speak from different countries that are either already using drones or are planning to use drone, and talk about how the addition of this new mode of transportation, because a drone for payload delivery is not to replace a motorcycle or 4x4. It is an additional mode of transportation that is put into disposition for logisticians to be used for specific use cases. And the idea is to discuss how it affects the people, the product, and the data workflow from a pragmatic standpoint, from the logistics standpoint. And so people will come and share with them how integrating drone into their transport fleet would affect the product flow, the data flow, the information flow, and also the people communication and interaction flow. And so that is something that we've been talking with the organizer of the LVC to bring to the next event, this more logistic operation lens, and see how it can add value to the discussion when a country is considering and integrating or adding this new mode of transportation. So like Denise says, stay tuned. Hopefully this will partially, if not fully, address your comment or concern.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. We've run out of time, but I'd still like to get to the last two questions. One is from Theo, who says, what is the likelihood the event will be moved to a later date?
Quite likely, because we found that the conditions in September and October are actually pretty good for flying, and that gives us a bit more time to plan, but
Okay.
this will be announced fairly soon.
Okay. And then is there a way for people to sign up to be notified? Is that through your website?
Yes, through the website, there's a mailing list sign up.
Okay. Okay. And the last question is from Helen. She says, on business models, I guess the key point is to facilitate bundling of commodities to deliver from different suppliers to different customers in the same geographies. Any thought towards a ride-sharing app to facilitate this?
Again, so we're working right now mostly with MSD for their medical shipments, but I think these are all ideas that we should probably bring into this targeted working group for supply chain optimization. And I think we have a call actually later this week, and
This is bringing back, okay, how did it affect the product flow and the logistic around the flow of products? So I think this will be addressed, as you mentioned, Denise.
Great. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This was a great presentation and discussion. Thank you to all the participants and the panelists. If anyone wants to follow up with any of the participants, feel free to either email me and I can make the connection, or of course check out the Lake Victoria Challenge website, which is lakevictoriachallenge.com. And yeah, thank you all. I'll be sending out
lakevictoriachallenge.org.
Oh, .org, sorry. Yes, .org. Forget my chat comment. But yeah, so I will be following up probably tomorrow with a recording of this and with the complete presentation. So that will be in your inbox soon. But yeah, thank you all. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.